In the deep reaches of space where stars shimmered like scattered fireflies against the eternal black sky, there was a colony unlike any human had ever known. A colony built by a quiet alien race that valued silence, ritual, and order above all else. They were tall, graceful beings with skin that shimmered faintly like pearl in moonlight, and for countless years they had lived in isolation, untouched by war or medicine, untouched by human concepts of health and science. Among them was a young girl, no more than 19 by human standards, who had grown up under the watchful eyes of her people, taught never to question the traditions of her ancestors. Her name was Lyra, and she was about to face something that would change not only her life, but also the way her entire people looked at humanity. One evening, as the silver sky above the colony dimmed into its twilight hues, Lyra stumbled in the marketplace, clutching her abdomen. Pain, sharp and deep, rolled through her body. Her people turned to look but did not come closer. In their society, pain was seen as something spiritual, a trial that one must endure, a whisper from the ancestors rather than a signal of the body's weakness. No one dared to touch her. No one dared to offer anything but quiet glances because to interfere was to interrupt her sacred trial. That it was then that a human stepped forward. His name was Mark, a medical officer stationed on this alien colony as part of the fragile cultural exchange program. To the aliens, humans were still a mystery. They were considered loud, emotional, and far too direct, yet oddly fascinating. When Mark saw Lyra collapse, his instincts as a medic took control, pushing aside the cultural rules that held her people in stillness. He rushed forward, kneeling beside her, his face set with determination. "Easy now," he said gently, though his voice carried a firmness that made the gathered crowd of aliens murmur among themselves. "I'm here to help you." Lyra's eyes widened. She could barely breathe through the pain, but confusion filled her gaze. No one had ever said such words to her. Help? The word was foreign when used in this way. Her people did not believe in intervention, and yet this human was breaking all their rules without hesitation. She whispered in a weak voice, "Why? Why are you touching me? What are you doing?" Mark's hand was steady as he checked her pulse. "You're sick," he explained in simple, calm tones. "I'm a doctor. I treat illness. You need to let me examine you." Her heart thundered with panic. Examine? The word carried weight she did not understand. Around them, her people watched in silence, their pearl-like eyes filled with distrust. Mark looked at them, then back to her, lowering his voice so only she could hear. "You have to trust me," he said. "I won't hurt you, but I need to see what's wrong. I need you to spread your legs so I can check what's causing this." Pain. The moment the words left his mouth, Lyra froze. Her eyes went wide with shock, her cheeks flushed with heat, and she shook her head rapidly. To her ears, the human's words were not medical. They were strange, shameful, terrifying. Among her people, the body was never spoken of in such open, blunt ways. To demand that she expose herself was unthinkable, humiliating, and even offensive. Her chest heaved with ragged breaths as fear swept through her. Fear not just of the pain inside her body, but of what this human might do. She struggled to push him away, her voice trembling as she cried, "No, what are you asking of me? Why? Would you say such words?" The crowd whispered more loudly now, some gasping, some shaking their heads. In their eyes, the human's demand was almost violent, a violation of everything sacred. But Mark did not flinch. He had seen fear before, in countless patients, human and alien alike. He knew the look of someone who had never known medicine, someone who thought science was a threat rather than a gift. Mark lowered himself to the ground beside her so that his eyes were level with hers. His voice softened, filled with patience. "Listen to me, please. I know this sounds strange to you, but I promise, I'm not here to shame you. I am a gynecologist. It means I take care of women's health. especially when they are in pain like this. I need to look. If I don't, you could get worse. You could even die. Lyra's breath caught. Die. The word stabbed through her fear like a cold blade. She had never considered that this pain might mean death. In her people's culture, no one had ever explained illness this way. They believed the body would heal itself if the spirit was strong enough. But the human's eyes were steady, his voice honest. There was no mockery in his tone, only urgency and something even stranger compassion. Her body trembled as she whispered, "You speak as though my life matters to you." "Why? You don't even know me," Mark answered without hesitation. "Because I'm human, and when we see someone suffering, we help. That's what we do." For a moment, the world seemed to pause. The whispers of the crowd faded into the background, and all Lyra could hear was the steady rhythm of her own heart and the unfamiliar kindness in the human's words. She wanted to run, to escape the shame, but the pain in her body chained her to the ground. She wanted to believe her people's teachings, that this was only a trial of spirit, but doubt had begun to creep into her mind. As she lay there torn between fear and hope, Mark slowly reached into his medical pack, pulling out a small holographic projector. With a click, the device came alive, showing a glowing blue image of a female body, human in shape, but simple and clear. He pointed to the abdomen, his finger tracing the area where her pain was. "This is what I need to check," he said quietly. "It's not about shame. It's not about disrespect. It's about saving you." Lyra stared at the hologram, her eyes wide with both horror and fascination. No one in her life had ever shown her such a thing. A map of the body made visible, knowledge made tangible. For the first time, she wondered if perhaps this human was not here to humiliate her, but to uncover a truth her people had long ignored. And yet, the fear would not let go. Her heart raced, her mind screamed, and still the pain inside her grew. Sharper, demanding an answer. She did not know what to do. The crowd waited, silent and tense, as though the fate of more than just Lyra rested on her decision. And in a way, it did, for what she chose in that moment could open a door that had been locked for generations. Would she trust the human? Or would she cling to the safety of tradition, even if it meant risking her life? The question hung in the air, unanswered, as part one closed in a silence filled with fear, hope, and the beginning of a story that would shake both humans and aliens forever. The night sky over the alien colony seemed heavier than usual, stars glowing faintly as if they too were watching the strange scene unfolding in the marketplace. Lyra lay weak on the ground, her pearl-like skin damp with sweat, her chest rising and falling with sharp breaths. The whispers of her people rippled through the crowd like waves, but not one of them stepped forward. They only watched with wide eyes, their culture telling them that her suffering was sacred, that to interfere would be to break the unspoken rules of their ancestors. And yet here stood Mark, the human doctor, refusing to obey the silence, his strong hands steady, his face calm but firm. Lyra's heart raced, not only from the pain in her body, but also from the words he had spoken. He wanted her to trust him, to let him examine her, to spread her legs so he could check what was wrong. To her, those words sounded like a demand from a stranger who saw her body not as something sacred, but as something to expose and study. Fear consumed her. She tried to push him away, her voice trembling. "No, you cannot. I don't understand why you ask this. It feels wrong. It feels shameful." Mark kept his voice gentle but clear, speaking slowly as though every word mattered. "Lyra, listen to me. You are in danger. The pain inside you is not normal. If we do nothing, it could harm you more than you know. I am not trying to hurt you. I am a doctor. I have sworn to help anyone who suffers. You have to let me." But his words only deepened her confusion. In her world, no one had ever touched Another person in the name of healing. Illness was considered a spiritual trial. If a woman fell sick, the community prayed, offered silence, and waited. To open the body, to examine it, was unthinkable. Her people had no doctors, no surgeons, no concept of gynecology or medicine any way humans understood it. And so when Mark said he wanted to examine her, all she heard was shame. All she felt was fear. Tears burned her eyes as she whispered, "If I do this, if I allow you, my people will look at me with disgrace. They will believe I have broken the most sacred laws." Mark looked at the silent alien crowd, their eyes filled with suspicion and judgment. He understood their stares, but his heart hardened with resolve. He had treated soldiers in battlefields. He had saved women who were too afraid to speak, and he had seen cultures resist medicine before. But he also knew that pain was universal and that compassion had no boundaries. He leaned closer, his voice carrying only for her ears. "Lyra, forget the crowd. Forget their whispers. This is about you, only you. Your life matters more than their judgment. If you collapse and never rise again, their silence will not save you. But I can. I can save you if you let me." His words struck something deep inside her. All her life she had been told to obey the laws of her people, to respect tradition, to accept pain without question. But here was a stranger who spoke as if her life had value beyond tradition, as if her suffering did not have to be endured, but could be lifted away. The thought shook her heart. For the first time she began to question if silence truly was sacred, or if it was simply ignorance passed down as truth. The pain in her abdomen twisted harder, making her cry out. She clutched her stomach and curled to the side, her body trembling. With weakness, the crowd gasped, but did nothing. Only Mark reached forward, his hand supporting her shoulder as he said firmly, "This is not the pain of spirits, Lyra. This is the pain of the body breaking. If you trust me, I can stop it. But if you keep saying no, the pain will only grow worse." Her tears fell freely now. She had never felt so torn. Shame battled against fear, and fear battled against the fragile seed of hope that Mark's words had planted. Her mind screamed to obey her people, but her body screamed louder, begging for relief. She looked up at Mark, her eyes shimmering with confusion. "Why do you care for me? Why do you not leave me to my fate like the others?" Mark's gaze softened. "Because I am human. And humans do not stand by when someone suffers. We fight for each other. We heal each other. That is who we are." The words pierced the barrier of her fear. Humans do not stand by, they heal. She thought of her people standing around her now, their eyes cold and distant, offering nothing but silence. Then she thought of this human kneeling by her side, sweat forming on his brow as he fought to save her. For a moment, she wondered if perhaps the humans were not as strange as her elders claimed, but something more, something powerful because of their compassion. Still, her voice shook as she whispered, "If I do this, if I trust you, and you bring shame upon me, I will have nothing left." Mark held her gaze and replied, "If you do not trust me, you may not live long enough to worry about shame. You must choose your people's silence or your own life." The weight of the choice pressed down on her, heavy as a mountain. Her body was weak, her spirit broken, and yet inside her a new strength flickered, the strength to decide for herself, not for her people, not for tradition, but for her own survival. She closed her eyes, her breath trembling, as if searching within for an answer. Around her, the whispers of the crowd grew louder, angry and fearful, but still none of them stepped forward. All she could hear was the pounding of her heart and the steady, patient voice of the human who refused to leave her side. The marketplace had never been so silent, the night never so heavy. Suspense hung in the air, every second stretching like an eternity as Lyra struggled between fear and trust. Would she let the human help her? Would she take the step that could save her life but break her people's laws? The moment lingered, sharp as a blade, her decision not yet spoken. The fate of her body, and perhaps her entire culture, hanging by a single fragile thread of courage. And that is where the night ended, in a storm of whispers, tears, and the heavy silence of a choice not yet made, leaving the human's hand still outstretched, waiting, and the alien girl trembling, caught between two worlds. The night passed with heavy silence, and by morning the alien colony was still buzzing with whispers about the strange event in the marketplace. Some called the human reckless, some called him shameless, and others simply feared him. But in the quiet corner of a simple shelter where she had been carried after collapsing, Lyra lay awake with thoughts that would not rest. Her abdomen still ached, though less sharply, but the confusion inside her heart was far worse than any physical pain. She remembered Mark's words, his insistence that her life mattered, his warning that death could be waiting if she ignored. Her pain, the images of the hologram he showed her still floated in her mind, the glowing outline of a body and his finger pointing to the source of her suffering. No elder had ever shown her such a thing. To see the body mapped like that was both terrifying and fascinating. It made her wonder if perhaps there was more truth in human knowledge than her people wanted to believe. When the door opened softly, she turned her head and found Mark entering. He carried no weapons, no tools of war, only his small medical pack. His eyes met hers, calm and steady, though she could see the weight of responsibility in them. He sat beside her without waiting for permission, his voice quiet but firm. "You are still in pain, aren't you?" he asked. Lyra hesitated, then nodded slowly. She felt shame for admitting it, as though weakness were a crime. But she could not lie. The truth was too heavy. "Yes," she whispered. "It has not left me. But I do not know if I can allow what you asked of me. My people would never forgive it." Mark leaned forward, his tone patient, almost pleading. "Lyra, I need you to understand. What I asked is not about shame or disrespect. It is medicine. Where I come from, doctors are trained to look after women's health in a way that prevents suffering. We call it gynecology. It means caring for the part of the body that is hurting you now. If I do not check, the pain could become worse. You could lose your future, maybe even your life." Her breath caught. Lose her future. The words carried weight she had never considered. In her people's culture, pain was a test, but he was telling her it could also be a sentence. Her hands trembled as she asked, "And if I let you, if I allow this examination, what then? What will you see? What will you do?" Mark opened his pack and pressed a button, and once again the holographic display lit up, glowing blue in the dim shelter. This time he showed her not only the outer form, but the inner parts as well, the organs, the systems that work together to keep a woman alive. He pointed carefully, explaining in simple words, "This is where I believe your pain is coming from. Something inside may not be working the way it should. I need to look, not to harm you, but to understand. Once I know, I can treat it. I can give you medicine or even perform a small procedure to save you. But without looking, I am blind, and you are the one who will pay the price." Lyra's eyes filled with tears as she stared at the glowing figure. For her people, such open talk about the body was almost unbearable, yet she felt something different now. Beneath the shame was a stirring of curiosity. The way the human spoke was so clear, so direct, so different from the vague chants of her elders. He did not hide behind riddles or rituals. He told her the truth plainly, and even though it hurt to hear, it also made her feel for the first time that someone truly cared. Her voice broke as she whispered, "Why did no one among my people ever show me this? Why did they never tell me that pain could mean danger?" Mark's expression grew heavy with sadness. "Because they do not know. They were never taught. They believe silence protects them, but silence can also kill. I am not saying your people are wrong in all things, but in this, they do not see the danger. That is why I am here. Her heart trembled. She had always believed the wisdom of her people was perfect. Yet here she was lying weak, barely able to stand, while the humans' words and strange tools were the only things that gave her hope. She closed her eyes, tears sliding down her face, and whispered, "It feels like my whole life has been built on lies." Mark shook his head quickly. "Not lies, just limits. They have lived without medicine for so long that they never knew what it could do. But you, Lyra, you can be the first. You can let me help you, and if I succeed, maybe your people will begin to see that healing is not shameful, it is life." Her chest tightened with emotion. To be the first. To carry not only her own life but the hope of her people. The idea terrified her, but it also stirred a strength she did not know she had. She looked at him through her tears and asked, "And you promise? You promise this is not shameful, not some strange act of humiliation?" Mark's voice was steady, his eyes unflinching. "I promise. I am a doctor. My duty is only to heal. Nothing more." For a long moment she said nothing, her thoughts spinning like storms. The pain inside her pulsed again, reminding her that time was running short. She thought of her people outside, still whispering about shame, still clinging to silence. Then she thought of the human who knelt before her, offering not silence but action, not judgment, but compassion. Her hand shook as she reached out, lightly touching the edge of his medical pack. Her lips trembled as she whispered, "Show me." Again, "Show me what you will do, step by step." Mark exhaled softly, relief flickering across his face. He adjusted the hologram and began explaining in even simpler terms, pointing to the areas he needed to examine, describing how he would check, how he would ensure she felt safe. He spoke slowly, repeating himself when her eyes filled with fear, never raising his voice, never pushing too hard. And slowly, very slowly, her fear began to shift. It did not disappear, but it no longer controlled her. By the time he finished, Lyra's breathing had steadied. She was still trembling, still unsure, but she was no longer frozen. She whispered, with fragile strength, "If I let you, you must promise to tell me everything as you do it. I cannot bear secrets." Mark nodded firmly. "I promise." Suspense lingered in the air like a storm waiting to break. Lyra had not yet given her final answer, but she was closer than ever before. The weight of her choice pressed down on her chest, heavy with fear but also lighter with hope. For the first time, she saw not a stranger demanding something unthinkable, but a healer holding out the chance to live. And so, though the choice was not yet spoken aloud, the first barrier had begun to break, and with it came the faint, fragile spark of trust that could change everything. The morning light crept through the narrow cracks of the shelter walls, painting the room in faint silver. Lyra sat on the simple bedding, her body tense, her mind still torn between shame and survival. She had spent the night in restless thought, hearing the distant whispers of her people outside. They had not forgotten the humans' words, and their judgment pressed against her like a heavy weight. Yet inside the small shelter, she could not escape the memory of his steady eyes and calm voice, his promise that he would not shame her but only heal her. When Mark entered again, carrying his medical pack, the air seemed to grow heavier. Greeted her softly, his tone patient but serious. "Lyra, I will ask only once more. Will you let me examine you? Your pain is not slowing. If I do not act now, it could become something much worse. You are brave for even listening, but you cannot wait forever." Her chest rose and fell with shaky breaths. Every word reminded her of the truth she could no longer ignore. The pain was not going away. It was growing sharper with each hour. She closed her eyes, tears slipping free as she whispered, "I am afraid, but I do not want to die. Do what you must. But speak to me the whole time, so I will know I am safe." Mark placed his hand gently over hers, not in dominance but reassurance. "I will explain every step. You are in control, Lyra. Nothing happens without your permission." With that promise, the wall of fear cracked at last. She nodded slowly, her body trembling but her heart stronger than before. Mark moved carefully, setting the holographic display beside them. The glowing figure of a female body shimmered once more, guiding his words. He spoke clearly, pointing to each step of what he would do, showing her where and why, making sure she understood. Her cheeks flushed with embarrassment, her eyes darting away, but she forced herself to listen. For the first time, she realized that shame had no meaning. Here, this was not an act of humiliation but of healing. The human's patience, his steady voice, and his refusal to treat her as anything but valuable began to soothe the storm in her chest. When the moment finally came, she laid back slowly, clutching the blanket over her chest, her eyes squeezed shut. Her entire body shook, but she whispered, "I trust you." Mark worked with calm precision, his movements careful, his voice steady. "You are safe, Lyra. I am only looking. Tell me if anything hurts or frightens you." The examination began, and though fear surged through her veins, she found herself listening more to his words than to the shame in her mind. He described what he was checking, why he needed to check it, and each explanation chipped away at the terror. She realized with amazement that what he did was not invasive cruelty, but careful science. He was searching for answers, searching for the source of her pain. After a long, tense silence, his brow furrowed. He had found something. "Lyra," he said softly but seriously, "I see the cause. There is an internal growth, something your body cannot heal by itself. Left alone, it could spread. It is dangerous." Her eyes shot open, fear flooding her chest. "Dangerous? What does that mean?" "Will I die?" Mark held her gaze firmly. "Not if I treat it. I have the tools. I have the medicine. But you needed me to find it first. Without this examination, it would have stayed hidden until it was too late. You were closer to death than you knew." The words hit her like a storm. She had feared shame, she had feared judgment, but now she realized she had been fearing the wrong thing all along. Her life had been slipping toward danger, and only this human strange science had uncovered it. Tears welled in her eyes as the weight of truth sank in. She covered her face with her hands, her voice breaking. "All my life they told me pain was sacred, that to endure without complaint was honor. But honor would have killed me. You saved me by breaking their silence." Mark placed a hand on her shoulder, steady and kind. "You saved yourself, Lyra. You chose to trust me. That courage is what saved you." Her heart swelled with emotions she could not name: fear, relief, gratitude, even hope. For the first time, she saw that humans were not reckless monsters as her elders whispered, but beings of compassion who dared to fight suffering instead of bowing to it. The shame she had carried began to fade, replaced by something new and powerful. Outside the shelter, her people waited in uneasy silence. When Mark opened the door and stepped out, their eyes turned toward him, cold and suspicious. But then Lyra appeared behind him, her body weak but her voice steady. "He saved me," she declared, her tone trembling but firm. "He did not shame me. He did not dishonor me. He gave me life when your silence would have given me death." The crowd murmured, some gasping, some shaking their heads. Her words struck against generations of belief, but she did not falter. She stood taller than her weakness, her hands trembling but her eyes fierce. "You see him as strange. You see his words as shameful. But I tell you now, he is a healer. He is the reason I am standing. Without him, I would be gone." Mark said nothing. He knew this moment was hers, not his. He only stood beside her, quiet and strong, while she faced the weight of her people's judgment. The silence stretched long, filled with shock and doubt. Some of the elders turned away, unwilling to accept what they had witnessed. But others stared at Lyra with wide eyes, torn between fear and wonder. For the first time, the seed of doubt had been planted in their ancient traditions. Lyra's heart pounded as she turned back to Mark. You risked their anger to save me. You risked my hatred when I thought you wished to shame me. But now I know the truth. You are a doctor, a healer, and I owe you my life. Mark gave her a small, steady smile. Then your life was worth every risk. Suspense still lingered in the air, for her people had not accepted him yet. The battle was not over, but something had changed forever. A barrier had been broken. A truth had been spoken aloud for the first time in their history. And though fear still weighed heavy, hope burned brighter in the young alien's heart. A hope that perhaps her people could learn that silence was not sacred and that healing was not shame but life itself. The air outside the shelter was heavy with silence as Lyra stood before her people. The faint glow of their world's twin moons cast pale light across the gathering crowd. Dozens of alien faces stared at her, some in disbelief, some in anger, and some with curiosity. Their pearl-like eyes reflected the faint silver light as they waited for the elders to speak, but none of the elders moved. For the first time in memory, no elder's voice rose to silence the young. Instead, all eyes rested on Lyra and the human standing beside her. Her body was weak from pain, but her spirit had found a strength she never knew she carried. She had endured fear, shame, and the sharp judgment of her people, yet she had chosen to trust the human who had saved her life. That choice had already changed her. She could not return to silence. Her voice trembled as she spoke again, louder this time. All of you know what happened. You saw me fall. You saw me cry out. You saw me suffer while you stood in silence. And yet this human stepped forward. He touched me when you would not. He spoke when you remained quiet. You call it shame, but I call it life. Without him, I would not be standing here tonight. The crowd shifted, uneasy. A low murmur spread, words of doubt and disapproval mixing with words of fear. An elder finally stepped forward, his voice stern but uncertain. You broke the sacred way, child. Pain is not to be feared. It is the voice of the ancestors. To let him touch you, to let him look inside you. It is dishonor. Lyra shook her head fiercely, her tears glistening but her voice steady. No, it is not dishonor. It is truth. Pain is not a sacred voice. Pain is a warning. If I had trusted your silence, I would be dead. But I live because the human saw what you could not, because he dared to break the silence you call holy. Gasps echoed through the crowd. To speak against the old ways so openly was almost unthinkable. Yet Lyra's voice carried a weight that silence could not crush. The people could see the fire in her eyes, the determination in her trembling body. She was not speaking for rebellion, but for survival. Mark stood quietly at her side, letting her words carry the moment. He understood that no human could win this battle for her. It had to come from her own voice, from the courage that she had found in the face of fear. Still, he watched the crowd carefully, ready to protect her if their anger turned violent. The elder's eyes narrowed, his voice cold. And what of him? Do you not see how dangerous his kind is? Humans speak of healing, yet they invade with their words. They force their strange ways upon us. Today he has touched you. Tomorrow he may demand more. Lyra's voice rose with sudden strength. He demanded nothing. He begged me to trust him, and he kept his promise. He saved my life when you would have let me fade into death. You fear his science, but I tell you this, it is not shameful. It is compassion. He is not a monster, he is a healer. And if you cannot see that, then you are blind. The crowd erupted in whispers, their fear colliding with doubt. For the first time, some of them looked at Mark not with hatred, but with something else, uncertain respect. They saw that Lyra still stood, that she had not withered or been dishonored, but had found new strength. Mark stepped forward at last, his voice calm but carrying across the square. I did not come to break your people. I did not come to insult your traditions. I came because one of you was in pain, and I could not stand. But while she suffered, that is what it means to be human. We do not worship pain. We fight it. We do not bow to silence, we heal. And if you let me, I will share this gift with you. Not as an enemy, not as a conqueror, but as a friend. The words hung in the air like a challenge and a promise. Suspense crackled through the crowd. The elders stood stiff, their faces pale with conflict. For so long they had preached silence, but now their people were looking at them differently. Lyra's defiance had planted a seed of doubt that no elder could erase with a single word. One by one, voices began to rise from the crowd. A mother spoke first, her voice soft but trembling. My daughter suffers the same pain. She cries at night, and I only pray, but nothing changes. If what the human says is true, if he can help, then I would let him. Another voice followed, then another. Some still resisted, shaking their heads in anger, but the tide had begun to shift. For every voice of doubt, another rose in quiet hope. And in the center of it all stood Lyra, holding her trembling body upright, her eyes blazing with determination. She reached for Mark's hand, gripping it tightly. He's the reason I am alive. And I will not hide in shame for saying this. If you cannot accept it, then cast me out. But I will never again believe that silence is sacred. The weight of her words fell on every soul gathered. To cast her out would mean rejecting her courage, rejecting the truth she carried in her survival. To accept her words would mean breaking a tradition that had lasted for generations. Suspense filled the night as the people waited for the elders to answer. At last, the eldest among them sighed deeply, his shoulders sinking under the weight of centuries. His voice was weary, but there was a spark of honesty in it. Perhaps we have been blind. Perhaps silence has been our cage, not our strength. If the human has given you life, then maybe it is time we learn what life truly means. A ripple of shock passed through the crowd. The declaration was not a full acceptance, not a complete surrender of their ways, but it was enough to shift the ground beneath them. For the first time, the doors of their culture cracked open to something new. Lyra's eyes filled with tears as relief washed over her. She turned to Mark, whispering through her trembling lips, "You did it. You gave them hope. You gave me hope." Mark shook his head gently. "No, Lyra, you did it. You were the one who stood against fear. You were the one who chose life. I only showed you the way." In that moment, as the moon shone down and the crowd slowly dispersed in uncertain silence, Lyra understood that her life had been saved not just by medicine but by courage. The courage to trust, the courage to speak, the courage to break the silence that had ruled her people for too long. And as the human doctor packed his tools and stood beside her, she knew that this was only the beginning. The story of healing had begun, not just for her, but for her entire world. The end.